Have you ever noticed how you can be grooving along, understanding someone speaking English perfectly, and then, bam, another person starts talking, and it's like they've switched languages on you?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It can be so jarring.
Like you're all comfy with American English, because, let's face it, movies and TV shows have drilled that into us. But then a British accent pops up, or Australian, or even just a super strong local accent, and you're left thinking, wait, rewind that, what did they just say?
Totally. It really highlights how incredibly diverse English is. We often talk about it as one language, but it's more like this massive family of accents and dialects, each shaped by its own unique history and journey.
Right. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. This deep dive is all about understanding why English accents can sound so different, and even more importantly, how we can train our ears to become more fluent across all those variations. Think of it as leveling up your English comprehension skills and becoming truly multilingual, even within just one language.
I like that, multilingual within English, and it's something anyone can do. But before we get into the how-to, let's start with the why. Why does English have so many accents in the first place? It's not like other languages are just plain vanilla, right?
Exactly. So what's the secret sauce behind all this accent variety?
Well, in many ways, English's huge range of accents is a testament to its global reach. Think about it. English spread across the world through colonization, migration, trade, all these movements of people. And as it landed in new places, it inevitably interacted with the languages already spoken there.
So it's like a cultural exchange program, but for languages.
Exactly. And over time, these interactions led to changes in pronunciation, vocabulary, even grammar. Imagine it like this. You've got a group of friends who love playing a game together, but each time they play with a new group, they might tweak the rules a little bit, adding a new twist here, dropping a rule there. Eventually, you have all these variations of the original game.
So it's not just that people in different places are pronouncing things wrong. It's that the language itself has evolved in different directions based on these cultural interactions.
That's super interesting. Let's break it down a bit further. When we think about some of the most recognizable accents, like American English, British English, Australian English, what are some of the key sound differences that jump out at you?
Okay, let's start with American English. One of the first things you'll probably notice is what's called its rhotic quality. That just means that speakers pronounce the R sound clearly, even at the end of words or before consonants. So words like car or butter, you hear that R loud and proud. American English also tends to have a bit more of a relaxed approach to vowel sounds. It uses fewer distinct vowel sounds than some other accents, which might make it sound a bit simpler or more straightforward to some listeners.
Okay, I can definitely hear how the R rolls right off the tongue in American English. Now, British English, especially the kind of accent you might hear on BBC News, often feels almost like the opposite to me. Right, you're talking about what's often called received pronunciation, or RP, which is often considered the standard British accent. And one of its defining features is that it's non-rhotic, which means the R sound is often dropped or softened, especially at the end of words. So car might sound more like ka, and butter more like Buddha. But it's not just about the R. British English also tends to have a wider variety of vowel sounds, and the way those vowels are pronounced can change quite a bit depending on the region. So you might hear a word like bath, pronounced with a short A sound in some areas and a longer A sound in others.
It's like the vowels are going on a grand tour of the British Isles. And then we have Australian English, which has its own unique charm and sometimes even its own slang.
Absolutely. Australian English has its own set of vowel shifts that can make it sound quite distinctive. For example, the I sound in words like fish or bit is often pronounced a bit higher in the mouth, so it might sound closer to the E in feet to someone not used to the accent. And like you said, the slang is a whole other layer. You might hear Barbie for barbecue or brekkie for breakfast. It definitely adds to the flavor of the language.
I feel like Australian English also has this rhythm to it, the kind of musicality.
Definitely. Australians tend to speak quite quickly and often run words together, which can make it tricky for non-native speakers to catch every word.
Right. And it's not just these big three, of course. We also have South African English, Indian English, Irish English, Scottish English, and so many more, each with its own distinct sounds and rhythms. It's incredible how much variation there is within this one language. But why is it that some accents just seem so much harder to understand than others? Is it just that some are more complex? Or is there more to it than that?
That's a great question, and it's something linguists have actually studied quite a bit. And it turns out familiarity plays a huge role. The accents we've been most exposed to, whether through media, travel, or personal interactions, are the ones our brains have learned to decode most efficiently. So, if you've grown up hearing mostly American English, a strong Glaswegian accent from Scotland might sound like a totally different language at first.
That makes sense. It's like our brains have developed these special filters for the accents we're used to.
Exactly. And when we encounter an accent that falls outside of those filters, it can take our brains a bit more time and effort to process what we're hearing. It's like trying to read a handwritten note with really messy handwriting. You can still figure it out, but it takes a bit more concentration.
So it's not necessarily that the accent itself is more difficult, but that our ears and brains just haven't had as much practice with it.
Exactly. And it's not just about overall exposure. The specific ways vowels and consonants are pronounced in different accents can create sounds that our ears just aren't used to hearing. It's like trying to pick out a melody played on an instrument you've never heard before. It takes a while for your ear to adjust and start recognizing the patterns.
And then on top of that, you've got things like speed, slang, and regional expressions that can throw you off.
Yeah, imagine you're watching a movie and someone says, "Bob's your uncle." You might understand all the individual words, but the overall meaning is totally lost if you're not familiar with that particular expression. It's the same with accent, slang, and idioms can add an extra layer of complexity that makes understanding a bit more challenging.
Okay, so history, geography, limited exposure, specific sound changes, slang, and regional expressions is like a whole recipe for accent diversity. But this is where it gets exciting. What can we actually do to improve our understanding of different English accents? How can we retrain our ears to become more fluent in the global language of English?
The good news is that, like any skill, listening comprehension is something you can actively improve with the right kind of practice. It's like working out a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
So it's not just a case of you either get it or you don't.
Yeah.
We can actually train our ears to be better listeners.
Absolutely. And one of the most effective ways to do this is simply to expose yourself to a wider range of accents on a regular basis. Think of it like building your accent vocabulary.
So it's not just about listening to more English in general, but really being intentional about seeking out different accents and dialects.
Precisely. And luckily, we live in a world where that's easier than ever. We've got streaming services with movies and shows from all over the world, podcasts hosted by people with diverse accents, audiobooks narrated by speakers from different regions. You can literally curate your own accent immersion program.
That's a great point. So for someone who's used to watching mainly American TV shows, maybe trying out a few British dramas or Australian comedies could be a good place to start.
Exactly. And don't just stick to entertainment. Listen to news broadcasts from different countries. BBC News is a classic for British English, NPR offers a great variety of American voices, and the ABC in Australia will expose you to a whole range of Australian accents.
Those are fantastic suggestions.
Yeah.
Are there any specific learning resources or tools that can help us really focus on specific accents and fine-tune our listening skills?
Definitely. Websites like Youglish are amazing because they let you search for a specific word and then hear how it's pronounced by real people and tons of different accents from YouTube videos. It's like a pronunciation dictionary on steroids.
Wow, that sounds incredibly helpful. What other tools are out there?
Forvo is another great one. It's a website where native speakers record themselves saying words and phrases, so you can hear a huge variety of pronunciations for almost any word you can think of. And while apps like Say Speak are mainly designed for practicing your own pronunciation, they can also be really useful for noticing the subtle differences in how sounds are made across different accents.
Those are all great digital resources. I know a lot of people also find that watching videos with subtitles, especially in the beginning, can be really helpful.
Absolutely. Subtitles can act like training wheels for your ears. They give you that visual backup so you can follow along with what's being said, even if the accent is a bit challenging at first. And as you get more comfortable, you can start turning the subtitles off for shorter periods and gradually increase the amount of time you're listening without them.
It's like a scaffolding approach, providing that extra support until you're ready to go solo.
Exactly. And while subtitles are great, don't underestimate the power of good old-fashioned dictation. Find a short audio or video clip in the accent you're working on, listen to it carefully, and try to write down everything you hear. Then compare what you wrote with the actual transcript. It's amazing how much this simple exercise can sharpen your listening skills.
That sounds like a great way to really zero in on those individual sounds and make sure you're not misinterpreting anything.
Yeah.
And are there any websites or resources that you recommend for finding transcripts?
TED Talks are a great resource for this. They often provide transcripts for their videos, and they feature speakers from all over the world, so you can get a good variety of accents. BBC Learning English is another fantastic resource, offering transcripts for many of their audio and video materials, which are specifically designed for English language learners.
Those are fantastic tips. And of course, nothing beats real-life conversation. So if you have the opportunity to chat with people from different English-speaking backgrounds, whether it's through travel, language exchange programs, or even just online communities, that's incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to ask people to repeat themselves or clarify if you don't understand something. Most people are happy to help, especially if you explain that you're trying to improve your listening skills. And who knows, you might even pick up some new slang or interesting expressions along the way.
Those are all really practical and actionable strategies. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that even with the best intentions and all the practice in the world, there will be times when we just feel lost or overwhelmed by an unfamiliar accent. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling discouraged or frustrated in those moments?
You're absolutely right. It's important to be kind to ourselves in those moments. Even native English speakers can struggle with certain accents, especially if they're very strong or from a region they're not familiar with. So don't beat yourself up if you don't catch every single word. Instead, try to focus on the main ideas and the overall context of the conversation. You can often piece together the meaning even if you miss a few details here and there.
That's a really good point. It's like when you're reading a book and you stumble across a word you don't know, you don't necessarily stop and look it up in the dictionary every single time. You often keep reading and try to figure out the meaning from the surrounding words and sentences.
Exactly. Context is key. And remember, language is a living, breathing thing. Accents evolve, new words and expressions emerge, and even within the same region, people might speak differently depending on their age, background, or social group. So it's a constant learning process, even for native speakers.
That's really reassuring. It's not about reaching some kind of perfect level of understanding, but about embracing the ongoing journey of learning and appreciating the diversity of the language.
Absolutely. And remember to celebrate those little wins along the way. Maybe you understood a bit more of that Scottish movie than you did last time, or you were able to follow a conversation with an Irish friend a bit more easily. Those small moments of progress add up over time and are a testament to your dedication and hard work.
That's so encouraging. It's about focusing on those moments of connection and understanding, even if they're not perfect.
Exactly. And if you find it helpful, try keeping a little journal to track your progress. Write down the accents you're working on, the resources you're using, and any moments where you feel like you've made a breakthrough. It can be a great way to stay motivated and see how far you've come.
That's a great idea. It's like having your own personal accent adventure log.
Exactly. And remember, the ultimate goal isn't just to understand different accents, but to appreciate the richness and beauty that they bring to the English language. Each accent tells a story, reflects a history, and represents a unique way of expressing oneself.
That's beautifully put. So, to wrap things up, what would you say is the most important thing for someone to remember as they embark on this journey of understanding different English accents?
I think the key takeaway is that it's a process, not a destination. It's about training your ear, expanding your understanding of the different ways English is spoken around the world, and embracing the challenge with curiosity and enthusiasm. And remember, the more you listen, the more you'll learn, and the more you'll be able to appreciate the incredible diversity of this truly global language.
That's a fantastic way to put it. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. It's been a truly enlightening conversation.
It's been my pleasure.
And for our listeners, here's a little challenge for you this week. Pick one English accent that you haven't really explored before. Maybe a regional accent from the US or Canada, or perhaps Welsh English or Jamaican English. Seek out some audio or video content in that accent, and as you listen, try to think about the history and culture behind it. How has the language been shaped by the people and the places where it's spoken? It's like a linguistic detective game, and it's a fantastic way to deepen your appreciation for the incredible diversity of English. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and happy listening.